Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writing Quest. My name is Brendan Pugh. Today we have Lucy McLaren with us, and she has written a book called The Awakening, the Commune's Curse. So we're going to talk to her about that. We're going to talk to her about publishing and her writing process. And how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Hey Brendan, yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, how you doing?
Good. Doing great. It's a little gloomy here today, but it's all right. We've had some hot days, so
It's come over here now. Like it's really hot in the UK now, so it's
yeah.
about time. It's like the end of June. Summer
hmm
is finally here.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of had a really long spring, and then it was like summer hit for like 2 weeks. All of a sudden,
Mhm,
it's been really hot, and now it's kind of cooled off today, so it's kind of
mhm.
nice. So,
Yeah.
so why don't you tell us how you got started, and
Mhm.
maybe tell us if you want to tell us a little bit about your book, how you got into writing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Cool. So how I got started, I mean, so I can remember wanting to write going back years because I've always liked like fantasy books, fantasy games. Probably around the age of 10, a lot of things happened that were like, so I got Ocarina of Time and a Nintendo 64. Like the Lord of the
Classic.
Rings, yeah. Lord of the Rings films came out of the cinema. And I read Tamora Pierce's Song of the Lioness Quartet and kind of a lot of, that opened up the door to a lot of other fantasy books. So around the same time, I kind of found this interest in various fantasy worlds. Um, and so I did start writing stories then. I remember sitting in the library at school, just like swapping stories with a friend of mine. Um, I think probably stopped doing that when I was like 15, 16, because being a teenager, a lot of self-doubt, anxiety stuff kicking in. I was like, there's no point in doing this. I'm not very good at it, so I'm just going to stop. And then actually, so I just kind of diverge off a little bit. I I started training to be a counsellor when I was like 26, maybe 27. Um, so there'd been like a 10-year gap there where I hadn't been writing at all. And then as I was training to be a counsellor, you have to have your own counselling as part of the training. And that helped me to basically reconnect with myself and think about, okay, what things I actually enjoy doing, um, writing being one of them. And I kind of just thought, why not just try writing again and see what happens? Because I remembered enjoying it a lot. I still, I've always been someone that reads a lot. And I've got like the journal somewhere where it's like, I'm going to write a book. And that was like 2018, I think. And then, yeah, I did. Being a student helped because I had a lot of free time, which I do not have anymore now, being the mum of a toddler. Um, but yes, I wrote the first book, Awakening, in probably about 6 months, because I think I finished it like November of that year because I did NaNoWriMo. Um, like got really overexcited and was like, I've written a book. I'm going to query this immediately, which I
Hmm.
did. Which don't do that. But yeah, so it's just kind of something that I've always enjoyed doing. Yeah, like I said, I love fantasy stories. Yeah, just a massive nerd in terms of like books, video games, films, TV shows. And so Awakening kind of started life as the character sheet. So I started playing D&D with a university friend, and I made a character called Evelyn, um, and had to write her backstory, and that kind of coincided with me deciding I wanted to write a book, and so it basically grew from there. Because the D&D backstories are really helpful because you literally just like roll a dice and it tells you what the
hmm
backstories are. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is helpful. Gave me a bit of a foundation. And it really just grew because I'm not someone who plots at all. So I just kind of went off on, I was like, I'll see where this is going to go. And new characters popped in. Um, and so I think did you ask what it's about as well? This is
Yeah.
this is the question I hate the most. I'm sure I'm similar to a lot of writers. It's like you can write this book, but actually describing it succinctly is the most difficult thing ever. But basically, it's kind of set in a society that's governed by an authoritarian kind of cult essentially, and they're hunting down any children who are born with these magic powers because they want to control them. Um, and so it's kind of a bit of a chosen one with the twist, I guess, because the main character Evelyn is not the chosen one, but one of the children that she ends up taking into her care under her wing has the strongest of these powers that have been seen, and she is the one being hunted, this little girl that Evelyn is guarding. So you see them, yeah, trying to escape from this government essentially. They try and find safety in a rebel camp. Things play out there. I don't want to say anything because spoilers, but it's
Sure.
just, for me, it's multi-perspective. My stories tend to be very character focused, and it's exploring like issues that you'll see in our society today within this fantasy world, because that's what I find interesting.
Yeah.
And like, it's not for everyone because it's not, it's not action packed. Isn't There's like maybe minimal amount of fight scenes, but exploring issues like oppression and victim blaming, and there's like historical sexual assault and mental health issues like anxiety, depression, grief, all that kind of packed into it. So I feel like I waffled a bit there, but basically, if you like character focused dark fantasy stories, then yeah, maybe give it a go.
Yeah. That's awesome. There's a lot there to unpack. So first off, we're about the same age, I'm guessing, because uh I've said this a few times, but yeah, we grew up in a time of like it was like the Star Wars prequels and the Lord of the Rings movies and the X-Men movie. Like it literally all just came out like in that one era. And so we were kind of doomed to be nerds,
Mm-hmm.
there's just no way to get away from it. But yeah, it's really cool. I like how you spoke there a little bit about like you wanted to write, you liked reading, you liked fantasy, but you kind of got away from that just because of being in high school. And I think there's definitely that time in everyone's life where maybe it happens then, maybe happens a little later, where you kind of eventually have to like re-find who you were.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's really cool. I like that, you know, you talked about that in the context of this because I think it's something that people don't talk about enough.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're a teenager and you're just trying to work out who you are, and that tends to be influenced a lot by other people, and not always for the better, which was my experience personally. And then having therapy did a lot for me in terms of actually unpacking a lot of stuff that I hadn't realized was there, and suddenly being like, why am I not doing this thing that I really enjoy and that I get a lot
Mhm.
from? Just, why not do it? Try and, we all get anxiety. Imposter syndrome is massive with every writer I talk to. But basically, just work through it. You can push through it. It can be challenging at times, but if you enjoy this thing, do
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, I remember not ever really telling anyone that I had started doing any writing because it felt like such
Mm,
a weird thing to tell people, like, I'm writing a book. And what I found is after I started telling people was either they thought it was super cool
mm,
or they just didn't even care,
yeah.
which is fine too. So, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, which was like everyone was going to be super negative and tell me that it was stupid and don't do it. It was
Hmm.
actually like really cool or whatever, cool, you know? So, yeah, that's really fun. You mentioned too, you don't really outline. So, do you want to get into a little bit of your writing process, maybe on this book, but then how it has it changed at all as you've gone into other ones? Or,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the reason I don't outline is because it really bores me, and it's interesting because I was just watching a video of someone that was like, you must outline, like here's a template to do it, and yeah, fair enough, it does work for some people, but genuinely, I feel like if I've written down everything that happens in the story, then I'm like, okay, great, like that's just, I don't really want to write it now.
Mhm.
I find it really interesting having a vague idea that develops as you write it, and you'll have characters that pop in that suddenly make sense, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, great, this is what's happening. It's because the thing is, when you're writing like that, your brain must have something going on in the background, like that understands, that's kind of almost a couple of steps ahead of you, that because as you're writing it comes out, right? So it's not just off the cuff. There's something going on in your brain. And I
Hmm.
find that, especially if I get stuck and then go away, do something else, and then brain is ticking over and the idea and will come to me, and I'll be like, okay, great, I can move that forward. What's interesting though is my first book being part of a series. I kind of, when I signed with a small press publisher, they asked me to do an outline for the second and third book. So I was like, oh crap, like I can't get away with this. So I did have to kind of sit down and think about where the story was going. And to be fair, I guess when you are writing a series, you do have to do it more to that extent, because otherwise you can just find yourself like down a hole. Like, you know, bless him, George R. R. Martin is clearly at that point because his series
Yeah.
just like got way ahead, like just massive, and
Yeah.
he's trying to wrap
And
it all up.
now he can't seem to finish it because it's just, well, you know, how do you fix it kind of a thing.
Exactly, it's too
Yeah.
big. So I think it's worthwhile when you're writing a series having that kind of. The thing that I wrote was basically like a big synopsis for books 2 and 3. So it's I'm not saying they're completely rigid and things won't change, but I think it's helpful having an idea actually of where the books are going. But book 1 was just completely written. I would just sit down and write and not really know where it was going. Um, I guess also with it being the first book in a series, you can not know exactly where things are going because you can just leave it on a cliffhanger and it's like, well, I'll solve that in book 2.
Hmm.
Which I think does annoy some readers. I don't mind it myself if a book has unresolved stuff. Um, yeah, so I guess I don't really have much of a technique, or I didn't have when I was writing this one. It was just had a lot of free time and wrote as much as I could, and the story kind of told itself. Um, yeah, I don't know how helpful that is to other people,
Yeah.
because
No, I think it's good. There's a lot in there of like, you know, when I've asked people this question, there you get a lot of things from like, do you um do you outline, do you not outline? Well, all, you know, I talked to someone who does mysteries, I've talked to people who do fantasy, and it's like I think it just depends on who you are, one.
mm,
Everyone's brain kind of works a little differently. Some people are more analytical. Some people just kind of want to go with it. Like it just depends. I
mhm,
think it also matters on the type of book. Like you're saying, like I agree with you. I think if you're writing like that first book in a series, you can definitely just go for it.
mm,
But probably the further out you go, like for instance, George R. R. Martin, he probably like having it more of an outline as you go might have helped. Maybe he did. Who knows? But
mm.
like I think, you know, like the longer the series, probably you end up outlining more because you have more threads to
Yeah.
figure out and all that. But at the same time, you know, it could also be more of like a, if you're just doing one shots where it's kind of like it's a series, but it's also kind of like villain of the week kind of a
Mm,
thing. Maybe you don't have to outline as much. So, you
yeah.
know, I think it doesn't really matter. I think it just, whatever works for what you're trying to do, I think it just depends, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm currently querying a completely separate book, which is like a dark fantasy that had a murder mystery element to it. So that I had to know who the killer was, obviously. Although I have heard people that just go into it not knowing and then just kind of get to a point where they're like, oh, I need to work out who this is now. I did know going in, and so yeah, that was again complete different standalone. It's I did do a little bit more planning on that. And when I say planning, I think I've got a notebook somewhere that's kind of got some random scenes that might have popped into my head, a little bit of backstory on each of the characters, and then that feels like enough. Um, but yeah, I think it depends on the type of story you're telling, but also the type of writer you are as well, because some people just want to have that, chapter by chapter outline. Um, yeah, and it's whatever works for you ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah. I do want to circle back too about, you talked about D&D a little, and I think that playing D&D is potentially a very underused tool for writers.
Mm.
I used to what I've done in the past. I have four brothers, so we'll get together and sometimes play D&D, which can be a little raucous, but it's fun.
Mhm.
But what I've done a lot of that is I take characters from my book and use them, and I'll use it to not so much figure out the story because maybe what we're playing is different, but
Mm.
I'll use it for maybe learning more about who the character is, like their
Mm.
personality, how they would react in certain scenes, and like I take those notes. So I think D&D is a very underused tool in
Mm.
writing, but also in outlining character development. Like I think it's also you could take a campaign that you play with
Mhm.
friends that like maybe you don't take one that's obviously pre-written or whatever, but just do one that you make up yourself,
Yeah.
but use how that game unfolds as part of your plotting
Mm.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think the joy of playing D&D is going into it as the character and not having any idea what's going to happen and just going with whatever comes up. So you
Hmm.
can probably get some really random scenarios that maybe wouldn't translate well to a story, but also some really interesting ones because you got all the different personalities of people coming in as well. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think it's a really helpful tool, and I haven't played it for a few years now since like the pandemic kind of shut us all down, and we ended up going online, and then it just wasn't the same, and I since moved away. So I haven't played it for a few years now, but it's something that I do want to go back to because yeah, I agree. It's a different type of storytelling, isn't it? Especially when
Hmm.
you're kind of waiting to see what's going to unfold as one of the characters.
Hmm. It's a good way to 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 learn to keep your character personality consistent because you
Mm,
never quite know who you're playing with. They
yeah.
may do something totally random, and then you like if you want try to keep that. It's a good exercise for that of like how
Mm,
would my character actually respond to this. And so
yeah.
I've been able, yeah, so that's pretty fun.
Mm,
Do so you've talked this book you had a publisher for.
mhm,
Do you want to talk a little bit about the publishing, self-publishing, like
mm,
how you went that route? Are you going to self-publish in the future?
mhm.
What's kind of your thoughts and plans about that?
Yeah. So book one is released with a small press, and how it's transpired is I'm not going to be continuing the series with them, so I'm self-publishing books two and three. Because to be honest, when I started writing this, I kind of only had in my head the idea of traditional publication, and I just thought I don't really know what I'm doing here, so I feel like that's the best route. Um, I went down the route of trying to find an agent, um, but I was simultaneously querying some small presses, and hence how I found the small press that published it. Um, and I think there are pros and cons to both sides ultimately. Self-publishing certainly seems to have just vastly like boomed over the past few years. Even since like this came out in 2022, even since then it just seems to be just growing.
Hmm.
And I think it's an exciting opportunity if you've got kind of the resources. I've got a lot of people who have done self-publishing, so now I feel like compared to 3 and a bit years ago when I got this book picked up, I've now know a lot more people that have self-published and can kind of talk to them about how do you do this, like where do I even start. So I feel a lot more prepared than I did back then. So I think it just kind of obviously I was thrilled to be picked up by a small press. It's a shame it hasn't worked out. And that's just kind of the nature of traditional publishing. Like, it's not just because you get picked up by a publishing house doesn't mean it's going to be like a massive success.
Hmm.
And part of me is disappointed about the rest of the series not coming out with the same publisher, but also at the same time, I feel quite excited about taking back control of it and having just the full creative license to do whatever I want with it. And I'm currently editing book two. I've had like the developmental edits back. It's been to beta readers, so it's going to go to a copy editor once I'm done implementing all the changes, and then I'm aiming for like an autumn release. Um, but yeah, I think I'll probably end up being a hybrid author ultimately because, like I
Hmm.
mentioned, that standalone book that I'm querying, I'm looking for. an agent or even another small press. But if that doesn't work out, I'll self-publish that book as well. So it feels like it just opens up another door ultimately.
Hmm.
Like you can try for traditional publishing, and if it doesn't work out, self-publishing is always going to be there as an option.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, movies and TVs and book, like there's a lot of all that kind of the same stuff of like movies and TV shows get started and canceled all the time. Like this
Mm-hmm.
stuff happens and
Yeah.
whatever, whatever happens with it. Um, but I think I agree with you that like it's nice that self-publishing has become an easier option,
Mm.
because I think before, one, I think it used to be a little harder to do.
Yeah.
And I think when I talked to a guy a few episodes ago, Caden Love, I don't know if you saw that one.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about he thought there there's used to be a bit of a stigma about self-publishing,
Mm.
like you self-publish if you weren't good enough to
Yeah.
do traditional or something. And he's like, he thought that stigma was leaving, and I agree too. I've read some great self-published books, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's becoming so viable for people that, like you said, it's like you can kind of go either way with it,
Mm.
you know. Is
Yeah.
there kind of a, and if you can't get into this, that's fine, but with the one being published by a small press and then
Mm-hmm.
you self-publishing, how to kind of, is there anything weird with the rights there, or like how does that kind of work?
So yeah, it's not ideal. Basically, the rights are going to revert back to me for book one
Hmm.
once the print run has finished. Um, so for now, it just kind of stays as is, like that they've got the rights for book one at the moment. But at some point in the future, hopefully, if sales are good enough, touch wood, then I'll get the rights back and I'll be able to re-release book one.
Hmm.
But it'll just, to me, it doesn't kind of impact upon what's going to happen with the series. I'm gonna still publish the same books that I would have published anyway. You can still get book one and books two and three as and when I do release them. So it's a bit unconventional, but I think that I don't foresee there being any issues.
Hmm.
Hopefully, and I'm taking it as a bit of a learning curve, and in terms of sometimes things just don't work out how you expect them to. Just kind of roll in with the punch and
Hmm.
I'm going to release books two and three. There's because ultimately I want to complete this series no matter what, like no matter whether it does well or not.
Hmm.
I just want the books to be out there and to say, yeah, that's done. I wouldn't want to leave it just book one. That would feel weird and just like that's well, it's never going to sell, is it? Because if there's no rest of the series. I've got a series that I started years and years ago that I've not finished. Not just Game of Thrones, there's other stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that's not someone's not going to pick it up and read it. Whereas actually, I've now I can set the release date, so I've got more control of that now. So that's the aim for the next couple of years, is to finish this series alongside
Hmm.
whatever else happens with the other books that I'm writing.
Yeah. Is there anything, there's one other thing I want to get to about series and finishing them, but is there anything from doing the traditional publish route that you've learned that you think will help in the self-publishing realm? Like, is there some crossover there?
Mm, definitely the whole marketing stuff. Because going into it, whether you're traditionally or self-published, just the level of marketing knowledge that you need is astounding. Um, and so I've been learning a lot over the past couple of years since the book came out, watching other authors, getting advice and just kind of taking notes, and also taking notes on what works for myself. Because sometimes I'll do something on Instagram or something that is really popular. And I don't understand why, but can I work it out and try and like replicate that? But it's just not a perfect process at all, because someone else could replicate it and they don't get the same results. Because I've done that on TikTok. I've seen something that's popular and gone, I'll do that, and
Hmm.
it's crickets, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a challenge, I would say, that just marketing in general, because
Hmm.
again, we authors tend to be introverted people, and having to put yourself out there and say like, please buy my book, and be a salesperson essentially. So I did not sign up for this. I just want to write the book and
Yeah.
put it out there and it to magically sell itself. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So that's definitely something to be aware of whatever route you go into, you are gonna have to actively market your book.
Yeah. And just to echo what you said, because I've been doing the social media thing for a while now. I've had this YouTube channel for like 3.5 years.
Mhm.
I will totally echo what you said that sometimes things just pop off and sometimes they don't. And I have yet to find the reason. Like, I I have tried all sorts of things. I've tried like doing really high edits on it, not editing stuff, just
Mm-hmm.
shorts, and I don't know. So like one will just all of a sudden take off and I'm like, I okay. Like
Yeah.
there it goes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's honestly, it seems to be the ones that you don't put all the effort into. Like I've got a video at the moment that's like on Instagram that just keeps getting likes and stuff. It's got, like, I don't know, 15,000 views, which is way more than I usually get. I'm like, I
Mhm.
put minimal effort into this. I literally had about 5 minutes before I was about to do some work, and recorded this thing, and just I don't know. Usually I'm like planning. I'm like, oh, what can I do? I'm trying to script stuff, and then something that I literally put very little effort into.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I so for my day job I'm a video editor and
Mhm.
so I some of my videos I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put a lot of effort into this and I
Mhm.
edit it and edit it. It takes me a few weeks and like just edit it as much as I possibly can.
Mhm.
Nobody watches it.
Yeah.
And then I have one video that like it's literally just a screenshot of me doing like I'm doing something on the computer and I'm just like
Yeah.
down in the little corner of it
Mhm.
and it just continues to get like constant views all the time. And it's been out for like 2 years. Like it just
Mhm.
keeps going. I'm like, okay, well, I don't I aim for the middle of the road now. Like I don't
Mhm.
do too much, but I don't do too little. I just right in the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to view it, isn't it? Because ultimately, if you end up putting too much effort into something, it's taken away from your writing time. It can become
Hmm.
incredibly draining as well, and also disheartening if you don't get the response that you want. And that's generally the case because it is so unpredictable, isn't it? You can put a huge amount of effort in, like I said, get very little engagement from it. So actually finding that balance of just it doesn't have to be super edited and polished actually because that's not guaranteed to get you any engagement. Work
Hmm.
out, what can you reasonably put into this, like in terms of your time and energy, and just stick with that. Don't let social media take over because it can very easily. You can
Hmm.
kind of, become very aware of engagement and trying to push it up, and that sucks the enjoyment out of being a writer in some ways because it's almost like the opposite of a creative process. It just is very draining to the
Hmm.
creative process.
I think people like what I would tell them is be very consistent, and
Mm.
then when you get that new reader, when you get that new sale of the book, just really be happy with that,
Yeah.
because you really can't, just. But I think the only thing you can count on is being consistent with the marketing.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So about the series, uh, I've had that. So I've actually confession time. I've
Hmm.
only read the first book of Game of Thrones, and I've seen the
Hmm.
first season. But
Hmm.
then when I heard that it wasn't coming out, I kind of was like, I want to wait a little. Like, I don't want to get too sucked in. And I've done that with a few things where I'm like, if I don't know when the next one's coming
Yeah.
out, um, so another one would be like Patrick Rothfuss, Name of the Wind.
Yeah.
I've heard that book is incredible, but
Hmm.
I'm kind of like saving it because I don't want to I want to read the whole thing. Whereas like a Brandon Sanderson, who we know is going to put out his books
Oh.
faster than everyone on the planet could ever
Yeah.
dream. I'm willing to read his, so I think you have just a valid point there of like wanting to make sure because I would hate for someone not to pick up your first book
Mm,
because they didn't know if the next one was coming out.
exactly. Yeah, and I know that's not it's not the case for everyone, but I do know I've heard that more than a few times that people will wait, um, because it is frustrating because Game of Thrones has been what 10 plus years since the last book came out. Um, there's a fantasy series called The Sword of Shadows, which I started reading when I was like 12, and I'm now 35, and it's still not finished. I'm like, I don't think it's ever going to be finished, and that's sad because you get invested in something,
Hmm.
and you're never going to see the conclusion, and Yeah, I completely appreciate why you would not want to put your energy into something if you don't know if you're ever going to get a satisfying conclusion to it.
Hmm. It's like the TV show Firefly.
Mm,
It's like I love that show. I think everyone loves that show, and here
hmm
we are, still just never getting a resolution.
exactly.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about writing processes.
hmm
Um, Maybe kind of adjacent to that, but also there may be some other parts of this. What are some of your biggest challenges as a writer? So, is it um, parts of writing? Is it distraction? Like, what are some of your challenges as a writer?
Distraction is definitely one of them. So like I said, when I started writing, I was a student, and that was just like luxury free time, which I didn't appreciate enough at the time. Um, so then I I went to have my son. So how old is he? So yeah, my book. So I signed the contract 2020, but it was like about 18 months, 2 years until we were going to release it because of the COVID pandemic having a huge impact on publishing, and just there was a delay. So in the meantime, I got pregnant, um, and that has a huge impact. Like being a parent
Hmm.
has a massive impact on your ability to write. Just getting used to having a newborn, and then toddler stage is a whole new ball game these days.
Hmm.
So you ultimately have to just work around it, and you just don't have as much free time generally in life, right? As a parent,
Yeah.
like it's just it's just a fact.
Yeah.
And so I find that is having to push myself in terms of like I'll get to an evening and be like, I don't have much energy right now. I could really just sit here and play Zelda or watch a TV show and not really think about much. But
Yeah.
if you want to get stuff done, you kind of have to boot yourself up the arse and
Hmm.
say, you've got, right now I'm trying to edit this book. If I want to meet the deadline, self-imposed deadline, I will say, but I want to get it out for autumn, so it needs to be edited. So I can't just let myself be exhausted. I'm like, okay, at least get a chapter done. So I find that having small goals like that is a lot more helpful than when I was not a parent, and had so much more free time. I could just sit and be like, I'm going to write 2,000 words, and it was just nothing.
Hmm.
Whereas now I feel happy if I achieve a couple of hundred words in a writing session.
Hmm.
Um, and distraction being the issue in terms of, like we said, social media. We're just so connected to everything on our laptops. I bought a free write, which is
It's on my list to get one. I want to get one real bad.
it's really good. I mean, expensive. I appreciate that. Not everyone
Yeah.
could afford it. But it was a great investment because that. So if anyone doesn't know, it's a distraction-free writing tool. It's like a tiny little laptop style thing, but literally all you can do on it is write. You can't. It's kind of very awkward to go back and edit on. So the aim of it is just literally you write. Editing is
and
for
and it
later.
only shows like depending on the model, it only shows like a few lines at a time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've got the Traveller. It's got a kind of a little screen, but again, yeah, you can't see much of it, and it's the aim just you sit and write. And to be fair, that it massively helped me because that's how I finished Echoes of the Ether Stone, which is the book that I'm querying at the moment. That was frozen for ages, for probably a couple of years in the first couple of years of my son's life. And I thought I'm never going to get that book finished. And I
Hmm.
bought the free write, and it was like a game changer. So if you do find yourself distracted, looking into distraction free writing tools like that, really
Hmm.
helpful. Issue being, now that I'm editing, I have to use my laptop again. And so the distractions are back. So yeah, I do find personally, I don't know about you, but I have to give myself about 10-20 minutes to get into the zone, because that first chunk of time feels like a challenge. Like I'm constantly like, oh, I need to check my emails. Oh, there's a
Hmm.
notification there. It's very easy to get distracted. Once you're in it, you kind of, the flow is going. It's a bit easier, but yeah, you have to be very conscious of what is taking up your time. If you
Hmm.
want to get something done, you have to challenge yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I free write's definitely on my list of things I want to try.
Mm.
I also a couple of little tools that I've been using. I have an app on my computer called, make sure I say it right. think it's just called Focus app, one focus. And basically what you can do is it can lock different apps or websites or like social media stuff. Like so you can set a time of like block it for 2 hours or something. And
Yeah.
then once you close out of the window, like you can't get into it. It
Mm-hmm.
will not let you. So I have an app for that. I've also got have you seen the advertisements for Brick? Have you seen those?
No, I don't
I
think so.
So I just got one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little square device. It's like this big. It's not very big. And it doesn't have battery or nothing. It's an NFC device, like a
Mm-hmm.
chip reader type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can do is you can set it up in the app to lock certain apps, and then you lock your phone, like you put your phone up next to it and lock it, like if you did Apple Pay or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it locks all the apps until you go back to the device and unlock it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really helpful for
Yeah.
like I leave it, it's magnetized on my fridge, and
Mm-hmm.
then when I leave for the day, I lock my social media apps on my phone, and then I can't get into them all day
Mm-hmm.
until I get back home and can unlock it.
That sounds really helpful because
Yeah.
it's, social media is such a time drain, isn't it? Like you can just
Hmm.
very easily find yourself scrolling.
And it's so necessary too at the same
Mm,
time. It's like
mm,
that's where it's like this
yeah.
crappy dichotomy of like I don't want to be on it, but I kind of
Mhm.
need to use it. So yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. It's exactly because if wasn't an author, just took that out of the equation, I wouldn't be on there at all because
Hmm.
it's just, the way that they're constructed is such that it's so addictive and just, giving you that dopamine hit, and it's just endlessly negative impact on mental health.
Hmm.
But as an author, all you're constantly told is you need to be present on all these platforms and be pushing your book, because if you don't, then you've got no chance. Because even actively engaging on those platforms, you still have to, push and push and push to get
Hmm.
any kind of small traction, don't you? It's you know, tiny percentage of people that will suddenly explode because of book talk or whatever.
Hmm.
Generally, we're just trying to make our voices heard amongst a whole sea of other authors.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and even like, we wouldn't be talking if it wasn't for social media. So
Mm,
it's one of those like,
yeah.
it's like, how do you use the benefits without it
Hmm.
distracting from what you're ultimately trying to do?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's an endless, I don't know if it'll ever end. We'll see what happens in the
Mm-hmm.
future, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, it's an interesting time. That's for sure.
It is.
Do how do you, so we kind of talked about this. Um, How do you stay motivated though? So like
Mhm.
if you're in those moments where like I just want to sit down and watch a show and like not, how do you push yourself through? One of the
Mm,
things that I've done, and this is kind of another distraction thing for me, is I've gone more to like a time-based writing goal as opposed to a
mm,
word writing goal. So like if I only have I don't really say like I'm gonna sit down and write 1,000 words. Because some days I'm feeling super creative, other days I'm not.
mhm,
Just don't know, but I can sit down and be like, I have half an hour. So
mhm.
I'm just going to write as much as I can for that time,
Yeah.
you know. But so how do you push through when you're not feeling like it?
Yeah. Because I'm coming out of kind of quite a big chunk of writer's block. And yeah, I was just kind of similar. And I was like taking away the word count goals, because you see that a lot on social media as well. It's like just aim for 1,000 words a day or whatever. And it's like, okay, great if you can do it, but sometimes you just really, your brain is not, it's just not doing it. You haven't got the time, whatever. And so that's where I was like, if I just sit here and write 100 words, I'll take it.
Hmm.
Um, because it is so up and down, isn't it? Some days you feel like I could just sit here and write for ages and just flowing. Some days it's just like pulling teeth trying to get a few sentences out.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I, as much as goals can be helpful for people, they can actually also be a hindrance. I think also, especially when you're comparing yourself to other people, you've seen people putting their word counts up, and you think, oh, I haven't managed
Hmm.
that in ages. But any progress is progress. You just got to take it one step at a time. There's no there's no deadline, right? Like as, because I think another danger is putting those deadlines on yourself and thinking, I want to get this written in X amount of time, and that impatience to get it out there. And I can fully appreciate that because it's you have this idea and it's exciting and you want to share it. Also, there is no rush. You can publish it whenever you can. If you want to go down traditional publishing route, that's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just giving yourself a break ultimately, fighting
Mm-hmm.
against that
and
idea.
and getting yourself to like getting your creativity to line up with the amount of time that you have to write. So like
Mm,
some days my brain is just like on fire for what I'm writing. Like I have all these ideas, I have all these things I can do, but I have
mhm.
no time to write that day.
Yeah,
And the next day I have nothing, but I have a plenty of time to write. So it's like make getting it all to line up well to
yeah.
can be really difficult.
Oh, yeah, that's the challenge. Yeah, I totally on that as well. Like, I'll have a day where I've got my son all day, so I literally there's no chance of being able to write, and my brain is like, "What about this scene?" And what? So I'll just sit there on my phone, like typing notes out, trying
Right.
to. Just my phone is full of just random thoughts and ideas and quotes and stuff that I'm like, I'm going to put this in the book at some point.
Hmm.
Um, and that's also a useful thing is just writing down stuff like that because that's part of the process as well.
Hmm.
Because yeah, if you don't have the time to sit in front of your laptop and write part of the story, can you write it in a journal or on your phone notes or whatever, so that you do feel like it's not going to go anywhere. You're still going to remember it, but you can add it later. It's
Yeah.
using the tools at your disposal.
Hmm. Do you have any thoughts about writer's block? Like, how do you deal with some of that when it comes your way? Because I
Mm,
think it happens to everyone
yeah,
often, I think.
yeah, and yeah, I had it for a good chunk of time, and it was just I don't know whether it was just a whole amalgamation of a lot of different kind of stresses, just writing and non-writing stuff, putting a lot of pressure on myself to because at that time what was I doing? I was querying the book that I'm still querying now, starting to write a new um, book. I was kind of getting agent rejections in that were really just bringing me down. Had the news about the series not being continued with the publisher, so it was just a lot of stuff that made me feel like quite disheartened about the whole process, and
Hmm.
that impacted upon my ability to write. Just really drained my creativity. Ultimately, the thing that worked for me was to just say, okay, I'm going to take a step back from this project right now. Like I know I want to come back to it at some point. I'm excited about it because it's a completely new one that I'm working on. That's like a Gladiator retelling, and Gladiator is my favorite film, so I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm excited about this, but I'm just not in the headspace to write it right now, and that's okay. Because as a counselor as well, I kind of have that annoying thing of I know what's helpful, which is like giving yourself a break and not beating yourself up about these things. But
Hmm.
actually actively doing that is another thing altogether. So I had a lot of
Yeah.
people telling me like you need to just take a step back and take a break. And part of me was like, yeah, I know that, but also I want to get it written kind of thing. And
Yeah.
you just sometimes you just can't push yourself and that it's okay. Again, like with the whole having the set goal thing, if you're not getting anything written, it does feel like it's just really a difficult process. Do take a break from it. So I found like reading more, playing games, anything that was like engaging with a story that was completely separate from my own. I found that
Hmm.
very helpful to unblock things, and it kind of slowly started coming back. Like my brain was suddenly like giving me new ideas for this story again, where it had
Hmm.
just been just completely quiet. So that does help me. I think it's something about engaging a different part of your brain, or there's some science to it.
Yeah.
Just doing something else that's completely separate to your writing.
Yeah. I one of the things I've done before is like not I take a little bit of a break, but then actually go back and read my writing from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what that has done is it's tricky because sometimes what it can do is like show you all the things that are wrong with what you're writing. But what it's done for me before is like kind of remotivated me of like, oh, this is why I like this story, or this is where I was going with that
Mm-hmm.
point or something.
Yeah.
Um, so but you still have to take a little bit of time. Like
Mm,
Don't be like writing something and then jump straight into reading it, because your brain's
mm.
kind of got to, it's like disassociate for a minute.
Oh yeah.
Then before you go back to writing, read through some of it and kind of re-engage with
Mhm.
the story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because that's something I've learned definitely over the few years since writing the first book is give it a break. Like once you've written it, just
Hmm.
put that away. Do not go straight back in. Don't query it straight away. Number one, and
Yeah.
number two, give it like put it somewhere. Just lock it away. Don't look at it. Go work on something else, or just read, or
Hmm.
have a little break from writing or whatever. Because yeah, it's amazing how much difference going back into it with having had like a little break from it. Just you go in with fresh eyes, don't you? Kind of read it. Sometimes it's a pleasant surprise. You think, wow, that's actually quite good.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's a mess, and you're like, I'm gonna have to fix this at some point. But that's the thing with first drafts as well, isn't it? There's generally you're just getting it all out. It can be
Yeah.
nonsensical, can be holes. That's fine. It's fine. You'll fix that later.
Yeah.
Just just get it out.
Do you find it's helpful to have multiple projects, like where you can kind of switch between them a little, and like
Mm.
I'm kind of stuck on this one, so maybe I'll do a little bit of this one, or does that make it worse?
So I found I could do this again before I had a child. I was working on a couple of different things at once, and I tried it recently, and I was just like, "That's not going to happen. My brain power is just not there." It was helpful having something I was writing and something I was kind of editing, something that was already written, and I was just delving into,
Hmm.
because that's again, I think it's probably a different part of your brain you're having to use to write compared to edit. Um, the thing is, again, I think it's dependent on the author because I see some authors, again, social media, there's people on there that are like, I'm writing about 3 projects at once. And it's like, good for you.
Hmm. Right.
If you can do it, great. Um, but again, don't put loads of pressure on yourself. I think short stories can be quite helpful in
Hmm.
terms of if you're writing a novel and then you've got some short stories you can delve into because that's it's not the full commitment then is it? It's something you can be very very short and you can just delve into it and maybe
Hmm.
write very quickly and it's just something that separates you out from the main
Hmm.
story you're working on.
I've done that with like side characters. So like I'm kind of writing the main story and then I get a little stuck, but there's maybe like a side character that I'm like, oh, this I have an idea about this, and maybe just write that scene of that
Mm.
character, whatever it was. Sometimes that helps kind of break the mold
Mm.
too.
Yeah, definitely. Just if it's something that I guess gives you a little break from whatever you're writing and you can just refresh your brain a little bit, right? Because when you find yourself thinking about something continuously, it can
Hmm.
become a real drain. Just having any kind of break, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. That's something that's I wasn't expecting that when I first started working on stories and writing and stuff.
Mm.
How it would occupy so much of my mind.
Oh
I
my
mean,
god,
like
seriously.
it's just always like running back here
Yeah,
all the time, you know?
genuinely. I had the thought recently that I was like, what did I think about before I was
Right.
writing?
Yeah. What was in there before I started doing this?
Yeah, what has this
Yeah.
replaced? I mean, I just don't know. I think there was just a lot more luxury free time to play all the new video games and watch all the
Hmm.
new films and stuff. Like, because that's all just piling up in the background now. Stuff that I'd like to
Yeah.
do. But yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about non-writers, and they're just living their lives, not thinking about all these other characters and stories and worlds. It's
Yeah.
really bizarre when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, what we have this happen regularly where like my daughter will be playing Pokemon or something, and she'll be like,
Mm.
"Dad, what level does this Pokemon evolve at?" And I'll just yell it back like, "It evolves at this level." And then my wife will be like, "You can remember that, but you can't remember like what you have to get at the grocery store." Like it's like, "Yep,
Uh huh.
that's what's in here. Just a bunch of Pokemon knowledge and Lord of the Rings. That's pretty
Hmm.
much all we got."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're coming up close on an hour here. So,
Mhm.
if to kind of bring things in, what if you had any kind of final advice about writing, publishing, um, or maybe be your top like 2 or 3 things that are kind of look out for this if you're just getting started or something.
Mm-hmm. So I think connecting with other writers is a really great thing. As much as I've been like crapping on social media, is useful for that, for meeting like other people, because you don't have to stay on social media. There's so many Discord servers that you can join and just connect with other writers. The value in that being you have a sense of community, you have people that you can share your writing with, because it's quite a lonely endeavor, right? Like you're sitting and writing a story, it can be quite cut off, and having other people that enjoy writing. Because, like we said, other people who aren't writing aren't sitting there thinking about stories all the time. Whereas
Right.
other writers understand what it's like to have that compulsion to want to tell these stories, and that feeling of excitement when you come up with a new idea and stuff. So I think that's really valuable, and that's something that's definitely a positive that comes from social media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I definitely encourage that, because it also means you can meet like critique partners and you can swap things, and that's a really useful thing that you do not want to skip. Having those kind of levels of feedback from people.
Yeah.
Um, Second bit of advice, probably the going back to that idea of not putting pressure on yourself. So don't feel like because other people have got a set goal of writing thousands of words a week that you have to do that as well, because again, is something that you see, kind of the downside of connecting with other authors on social media is that comparison stuff that comes in. So you do see what other people are doing and you see kind of the progress they're making, and that can make you feel quite down if it's not something you're able to achieve yourself. But everyone's circumstances are unique, whether you're a parent, whether you're working a full-time job, whatever it is. Writing has to be whatever works for you,
Mm-hmm.
whether that is you're writing in the evenings or weekends or whatever. Just do what feels best for you. Don't feel like you have to have a pressure and compare to other people and meet all those kind of goals that other people are working towards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that pressure one's real big.
Mm.
I think about that a lot because I used to have that, even talking with authors like I've been doing. I was talking to one guy and Jonathan Weiss, and he's been trying to put out a book every 5 months,
Wow.
and he's doing it, and that's great. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's all you always have that twinge of, well, why am I not doing that? Even
Mm.
though that's like
Yeah.
a completely absurd question, like totally absurd. Like everyone's life is so different.
Mm-hmm.
All people are so different, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think that one's a huge one because
Mm-hmm.
it can paralyze you too. Like it can stop you
Mm-hmm.
from doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it becomes this huge pressure and stress, doesn't it? And that stops the creativity from flowing, as I've found personally.
Hmm. For sure. Well, it's been great talking to you. It's been awesome.
You too. Thank you.
Where can we find you? Where's all your stuff? Where can we buy the book? All that kind of stuff.
So author website is lucyamclarenauthor.com. And the main social media that I use is Instagram, which is at Lucy_A_McLaren. I'm on a few others, but that's the one that I probably post to most consistently. And yeah, you can buy Awakening now. Good time to delve into it because book two's coming out in autumn. So, and I've also released a short story in the same series, which is on Amazon, for like I think 99 cents, which is about 78p, which is a bargain if I do say so myself.
I would say so.
So yeah, if you like character focused stories, dark fantasy, then yeah, it's probably a series that you might want to check out.
Awesome. Well, great. It's been awesome talking to you. We'll put all that stuff down in the description.
Mhm.
And thanks everyone for watching. This has been Writing Quest with Lucy McLaren. Make sure to check out all of her stuff, and we will see you next time.